Billionaire CEO fired his black secretary after one night 5 years later. She returns with a secret. She was just a secretary. He was a billionaire CEO. When she told him she was pregnant, he fired her on the spot. 5 years later, she walked back into his boardroom, not for revenge, but to buy his company. And when she introduced her 3 children on stage, he realized too late she was never just a secretary. She was the future, and he was no longer part of it. The woman in the glass elevator. The glass elevator hummed softly as it climbed toward the 47th floor, each passing level reflecting a version of her that no longer existed. Aaliyah Jackson stood in silence, her reflection catching in the steel trim straightened blazer, tailored navy pants, curls pinned like armor. Behind her eyes, though, were the echoes of sleepless nights, the wails of newborn twins, and the metallic taste of betrayal that never quite faded. She had walked out of this very building 5 years ago with a cardboard box in her arms and a pink slip in her pocket, pregnant, alone, dismissed. Now she was back. The elevator doors opened to a hush of tension. The boardroom stretched wide and sterile before her. Glass walls, mahogany table, 12 men in dark suits, and at the head, Marcus Whitmore. His hair was a little grayer now, his posture still perfect, but his eyes widened when he saw her. She walked forward slowly, placing a single folded letter onto the center of the table. Her voice was calm. "I believe this belongs to you." Marcus stared down at the paper. It was worn at the corners. The ink faded slightly with time, but his signature at the bottom was still sharp. It was the letter he had once handed her without even looking up her termination notice. The day she told him she was carrying his child, there was no apology then, no pause, just a clean cut. Remove the problem, erase the woman. But Aaliyah had not disappeared. She had built something in the dark. Now she stood here not as a secretary, but as the woman who owned the company that once erased her. Behind her, the assistant closed the door gently. In the quiet, Aaliyah unfolded her hand and slid a second document across the table. Phoenix Digital has acquired 51% of Whitmore Enterprises as of this morning, she said, effective immediately. I'll be overseeing this transition. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Marcus's mouth parted, but nothing came out. For the first time in a decade, he looked lost. Aaliyah turned toward the wall of windows behind him. The city stretched out like a map she now knew by heart. She didn't come here to gloat. She came here to remember who she became the moment he decided she wasn't enough, and to show him he was wrong. Chapter 1. The Pink Slip. The morning she told him, the air smelled like burnt coffee and fresh toner. Aaliyah Jackson stood outside Marcus Whitmore's office, clutching a manila folder with shaking fingers. Her heels pinched the cheap pair she kept for days like this. When her regular ones had finally given out, she had redone her makeup 3 times that morning, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She could have waited, could have hidden it longer, but something inside her refused to lie. A baby grows quietly, but a lie will claw its way out. When she stepped into the office, Marcus didn't look up. His eyes were fixed on the screen, brows furrowed, hand tapping against his jaw, the way he always did when profits dipped below projections. "Mr. Whitmore," she said softly. Still nothing. She cleared her throat. "Marcus, I need to tell you something." That made him glance up. "Just briefly, make it quick. I'm already behind." She stepped forward. Her palms were clammy. "I'm pregnant." Silence. At first, she thought he hadn't heard, but then, slowly, he set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. The light in the room shifted. "With whose child?" he asked. The question was sharp, not curious, not even angry, just cold. Aaliyah blinked. "Yours." A beat passed, then two. Marcus let out a short breath. That's not possible. It is. He stood up, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Downtown Chicago sprawled beneath them, powerful, glittering, merciless. You're my secretary, Aaliyah. This is not acceptable. Her stomach dropped. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know. He turned. His face was blank. You've jeopardized the trust in this office. What? Her voice cracked. This isn't a scandal. It's a child. Yours. He walked past her, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. From a pre-printed stack, termination forms, her name filled the top line. I'll have HR process it by noon, he said. We'll provide a severance. 2 months? No, she whispered. You're firing me. Because I'm pregnant. No. I'm releasing you because you've crossed a professional line. This is a corporation, Aaliyah, not a tabloid. He slid the paper across his desk. Sign this and leave quietly. Her hand hovered over the desk, but not to sign. She looked at the man she had once believed was capable of feeling something, anything more than numbers. You think erasing me will erase what happened? Marcus said nothing. Aaliyah picked up the form, folded it once, and walked out without a word. It was raining when she left the building. Of course it was. The security guard didn't meet her eyes. No one did. She held the cardboard box against her chest, the one they always gave you when they sent you away. A stapler, 2 frame photos, a stress ball, the mug that said coffee first, chaos later. In her coat pocket, a folded sonogram, 7 weeks, a shape barely formed, but real. She stood at the corner of LaSalle and Monroe, watching taxis hiss through the rain. Headlights blurring through tears she refused to let fall. And just like that, it was over. The steady paycheck, the illusion of safety, the man who kissed her at midnight once and whispered promises he clearly never meant to keep. Gone. That night, she lay on the pull-out couch in her sister's tiny apartment, a trash can beside her in case the morning sickness returned early. She stared at the ceiling, hand resting on her stomach. Her whisper cracked the silence. I'll protect you, even if no one protects me. 2 weeks later, she was working the late shift at a diner in Atlanta, mopping floors in silence. No one there knew she used to type financial reports for a billionaire. No one there cared. But one night, after a double shift, she found herself staring at a YouTube video about logistics optimization. Something sparked that night. While the twins inside her kicked softly, she scribbled something on a napkin. It would become the first algorithm in what one day would be Phoenix Digital. But for now, she was still invisible, still bleeding, still alone. Some women break, others burn. Aaliyah Jackson learned how to build fire from the ashes. Chapter 2, Double Shifts and Diapers. The twins came 2 months early. She hadn't planned for that. Then again, she hadn't planned for any of it. Aaliyah was alone in the delivery room at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. No flowers, no visitors, just a tired nurse who kept squeezing her hand and whispering, "You're doing great, Mama. Just breathe." She screamed her way into motherhood with cracked lips, swollen eyes, and fear clawing at every inch of her spine. But when they placed the first baby on her chest, red, wrinkled, and crying like he was already angry at the world, Aaliyah broke into tears. And when the second one came smaller, silent for a moment, that felt like forever, she whispered into the sterile air, "You're safe now." She named them Elijah and Ezra, 2 warriors, 2 heartbeats that reminded her why she hadn't collapsed. 3 days later, she was back on the bus, carrying them both in thrifted carriers, formula samples stuffed in her tote, and a hospital bracelet still clinging to her wrist. The apartment was more of a room than a home. Her cousin's spare space with a mattress on the floor and no curtains on the window. She made bottles in the dark, while the boys cried in stereo. There was no nursery, no white noise machine, no baby monitor, just instinct. Her days blurred into rotations of feedings, burping, spit up, and cheap laundry detergent that stung her hands. And when the babies finally slept, if they slept, she opened the second-hand Chromebook she'd found at a pawn shop and began teaching herself Python. She worked at the grocery store from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., pushing carts in the rain, stocking shelves until her back gave out. At night, she cleaned offices downtown. By the time she returned home, it was past midnight, and still, she studied. At first, it was just YouTube tutorials, then free online courses, then PDFs she printed at the library. She borrowed textbooks from strangers, watched TED Talks while feeding the boys, paused coding lectures to change diapers. One night, Ezra woke up crying again, gassy and red-faced, refusing to settle. As Aaliyah rocked him, swaying near the cracked window, she whispered softly, "One day, I'll build something. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I swear to you, this struggle will mean something." Her body changed, worn thinner than she thought possible. Her fingers were raw from typing at night, pushing carts by day, scrubbing at stains that never really came out. Her dreams didn't vanish. They just had to wait. There were nights she stood over the stove, boiling noodles for the third time that week, and the doubt would hit hard. Who did she think she was? Just a girl with babies and bruised pride. Fired, forgotten, replaced. But then Elijah would giggle in his sleep. Ezra would curl his tiny fingers around hers, and somehow she'd keep going. The real turning point came from a receipt at the grocery store one afternoon. She watched the manager fumble through the back-end inventory system, swearing under his breath. The system was clunky, old, took forever to update. You know, Aaliyah offered quietly. You could streamline all this with a conditional filter on the database and a dashboard plugin. He blinked. A what? She smiled. Never mind. But that night, she stayed up until 3 a.m., building a simple prototype that could reduce their weekly supply order misfires by 40%. She emailed it to the manager anonymously. The store adopted it 2 weeks later. She never told them it was hers, but it was the first time she realized she could build something real. By the twins' first birthday, Aaliyah had collected enough freelance work to pay off one of her credit cards. Just spreadsheets at first, then logistics work for a startup that didn't ask about her resume. They didn't care that she was a single mom. They only cared that her models worked. That was enough. Then, one afternoon, as she was changing Elijah's diaper with one hand and typing with the other, her 4-year-old niece wandered in and pointed at the screen. "What are you building?" Aaliyah didn't know what to say at first, but then she smiled. Something that makes things easier, so other moms don't have to choose between diapers and dreams. The boys were growing, crawling, babbling. Ezra liked to knock over anything she built. Elijah liked to hand it back. They didn't have much, but they had her, all of her, even when she was tired, especially then. One night, Elijah pulled at her sleeve as she sat working. He looked at her with those sleepy brown eyes and asked, "Mama, do rich people ever cry?" She paused. Something twisted inside her. "Yes," she said. "Even billionaires cry, but not all of them know why." She didn't have money or power, but she had purpose. And when a woman has purpose, the world better pay attention. Chapter 3, Phoenix Digital. It started in the corner of a laundromat. Aaliyah sat at a chipped plastic table between two whirring machines, bouncing Ezra's car seat with one foot, while Elijah chewed on a teething ring, her laptop missing the E key, balanced on a laundry basket. The glow of the screen lit up the soft curve under her eyes, the dark half circles that never really faded. That night, she typed the first real lines of the engine that would change her life. The software had no name then, just rows of logic, simple functions, and tired breath. She was building a supply chain prediction tool, an algorithm that could cut waste, track demand patterns, and adapt on the fly, not because she wanted to be a tech mogul, not yet, but because she was tired of watching systems fail people like her. By year 2, the twins were in daycare during the day, paid for by tips and side jobs, and Aaliyah worked out of a dusty co-working space that smelled like old coffee and dreams that never made it past the pitch deck. She pitched her software to anyone who would listen. Local grocers, warehouse managers, school district buyers. Most of them smiled politely, nodded, then ghosted her. One man told her, "You're smart, but you're not, one of those startup types." She smiled, thanked him, and added a new feature that night, one that would later land her the attention of an East Coast manufacturing group. The name came to her in the middle of a panic attack. She had just come back from a rejected investor meeting, tears still drying on her cheeks, when she sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "I am not ashes. I'm the flame that came after." She opened her laptop and typed the words, "Phoenix Digital," because if she couldn't rise, then what was the point of surviving? Her first contract was tiny, just a $40 implementation for a family-run packaging company in Georgia. But when she saved them $60, 0 in logistics errors in the first quarter, they told everyone. Within 6 months, Phoenix Digital had clients in 5 states, and the little girl who once filed invoices was now standing in rooms full of men who mispronounced her name and still had to call her ma'am. There were still hard days when the twins got sick and she had to give a Zoom demo with a baby asleep on her chest. Days when a client told her, "You don't look like someone who builds things." But then came the morning. She opened her inbox to a message with the subject line, "Feature in Forbes, 10 Black Women Rebuilding American Tech." She read it twice before the meaning landed. They knew her name now, and that scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. Aaliyah didn't buy herself a new car. She didn't move to a penthouse. Not yet. She bought her cousin a new water heater, donated laptops to the daycare center that let her kids nap in a storage closet during flu season. And she kept coding, kept building, because for every door that slammed in her face, she was now building her own house. On the night Phoenix Digital hit its first million in revenue, she didn't throw a party. She didn't pop champagne. She sat on the floor of her tiny office, the twins asleep against her sides, and whispered, "You did good, Mama, and no one gets to take that from you." Months later, a recruiter from a national tech conference called her. "We'd like you to speak on the main stage," they said, about female leadership, about rising from nothing. She said yes before fear could answer first. And when she stood there, a spotlight on her face and 3,000 eyes watching, she didn't talk about AI or logistics or profit margins. She said, 5 years ago, someone told me I didn't belong in the room. So I built my own, and I brought others in with me. The room stood in ovation. Backstage, her phone buzzed. A new message. "Marcus Whitmore." Subject line, "Request for meeting." She didn't open it. Not yet. They only call you brilliant when you no longer need their approval. Chapter 4. The woman in the headlines. Marcus Whitmore didn't read fluff articles. He skimmed the Financial Times before 6 a.m., memorized stock trends before breakfast, and tossed lifestyle magazines into the trash without a glance. But that morning, sitting in the back of his black town car, On the way to a quarterly disaster of a board meeting, something in the Wall Street Journal caught his eye. From fired secretary to tech powerhouse, Aaliyah Jackson's Phoenix rises. The title sat at the bottom of the page. Small, but something about it stuck. Aaliyah Jackson. He hadn't heard that name in years. His brow furrowed. He picked up the paper, read the first paragraph, then the second. By the third, his chest tightened. She had built Phoenix Digital from a kitchen table while raising twin boys alone. She'd revolutionized supply chain tech for small businesses, clients across 7 states, contracts with Fortune 500 companies, projected IPO within the next 24 months. Marcus lowered the paper, looked out the window at the skyline he once believed he owned, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel in control. Across the country, Aaliyah stood in front of a mirror in her hotel suite, smoothing the sleeve of her navy blue blazer. Her badge read, Keynote Speaker, Aaliyah Jackson, CEO, Phoenix Digital. The boys had drawn a picture the night before her on a stage, arms raised like a superhero, with big scribbled letters that read, Go Mommy. She kept it folded in her wallet like armor. When she walked on stage, the room rose, not because she was famous, but because she was unignorable. There was something in her walk, something earned, not given, a steady fire beneath every calm breath, a grace that didn't ask for approval. She stood at the podium, glanced at her notes, then looked out over the sea of faces. My name is Aaliyah Jackson. I wasn't born into boardrooms. I started as a secretary, and I left that job with a pink slip and 2 babies on the way. Silence. Pin drop. I didn't come from money. I didn't go to Harvard. I came from necessity. I built a company out of desperation, and then out of conviction. Applause. First soft, then building, roaring. In the back row, standing in the shadows, Marcus lowered his head. That night, alone in his penthouse, Marcus poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the framed photo on his desk. An image of himself breaking ground on Whitmore Enterprises' new logistics wing. He had been proud then, young, certain, but the truth was, the company was bleeding. Outdated tech, supply failures, missed deliveries, clients defecting to leaner, faster firms like Phoenix Digital. He took a sip. He remembered her, the way she used to be quiet, efficient, always watching, the kind of woman who saw everything and said nothing. He had believed she was disposable. She had proved him wrong. The next morning, his assistant knocked gently on the office door. Sir, I pulled the numbers you asked for on Phoenix Digital. Marcus waved her in. She handed him the file. Phoenix Digital's valuation was rising faster than projections could track. Major clients, a federal government pilot project, and under CEO, Aaliyah Jackson, 33, Atlanta. There was a small photo. Her hair was longer now, natural curls, her eyes steady. The smile was different, quietly, unshakable. He stared at the image for a long time. Then, with a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, he said quietly, Schedule a meeting. Tell her. I'd like to talk. But Aaliyah didn't respond. Not the first time. Not the second. She was in New York, sitting in the green room before her Good Morning America interview. Her phone buzzed. Again, Marcus Whitmore. She didn't silence the notification. She just put it face down. Later that night, she tucked the boys into bed in their small but sunlit apartment. Ezra wanted to know if Phoenix was a real bird. Elijah wanted her to read Where the Wild Things Are Again. When they finally drifted off, she sat by the window, feet curled under her, the city lights flickering like stars that never stopped burning. She whispered, You see me now, don't you? And for the first time, she didn't need an answer. He saw her in the headlines, but she had seen herself there long before he ever looked. Chapter 5. The Deal. The lobby of Whitmore Enterprises hadn't changed. Same marble floors. Same glass-paneled walls that reflected everything but the truth. Same security desk, where the guards still didn't look up when she walked in. But this time, she wasn't holding a cardboard box. She was carrying a leather briefcase and the future of the company in her hands. Aaliyah stepped into the elevator without a word. As the doors closed, her reflection caught in the mirrored wall. She didn't smile, didn't adjust her suit, didn't need to, because she wasn't here to impress. She was here to own. Upstairs, the boardroom was colder than she remembered. 12 men in suits, all watching her. And at the head of the table, Marcus Whitmore. He stood when she entered. A reflex, maybe, or something older than pride. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. For a split second, it all rushed back the way he once looked at her when no one else did. The way he stopped looking at her the moment things got inconvenient. But today, she didn't come for the past. She came for what was hers. She laid the papers out on the table. Every signature, every clause, every dotted I and crossed T. Her voice didn't waver. As of 7, Sitter E. This morning, Phoenix Digital has acquired 51% of Whitmore Enterprises. We are now the controlling entity. One of the board members stuttered. There must be some mistake. That kind of acquisition, there's no mistake, Aaliyah said calmly, flipping to the last page. We offered you a chance to modernize last year. You declined. Our investors didn't. She looked at Marcus. His jaw was tight. He hadn't said a word, but his knuckles were white against the edge of the table. She continued. This company is sinking. Supply chain failures, outdated systems, client losses. You don't need a bailout. You need a new engine. And that's what I built. She slid the final page forward, a plan to merge Phoenix's technology across Whitmore's entire infrastructure. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled. Why now? Aaliyah looked him in the eye. Because 5 years ago, I needed this company. Now this company needs me. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. You could have let us crash, he said. Let me fall. She tilted her head slightly. I thought about it. That honesty hung in the air, quiet and heavy, but then I remembered, I don't build things to watch them break. Even when the people inside them tried to break me, the meeting continued. Questions, objections. She answered everyone with poise, precision, power. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. By the end of the hour, the vote was unanimous. Phoenix Digital would take the reins, and Aaliyah Jackson, once the invisible woman in the corner of this room, was now the one signing their checks. As the board filed out, murmuring to each other in low, shaken tones, Marcus stayed behind. She gathered her things slowly. He cleared his throat. You have every right to hate me. She paused, looked up. I don't hate you. Marcus. He searched her face for softness, for some echo of the woman he used to touch behind closed doors. But that woman was gone. I just don't need you anymore. She turned to leave, but at the door, she stopped. There's a press conference tomorrow, she said, without looking back. I'll be introducing the team, and my children. Silence. They're yours. By the way, not that I expect anything from you. And then she walked out, not with rage, not with revenge, but with the kind of grace that comes from surviving what was meant to bury you. He fired her like a problem. Now she walked in as the solution. Chapter 6. These are my children. The press room was packed. Rows of cameras, reporters with notepads poised, screens glowing, and behind the podium, a sleek digital banner, Phoenix X Whitmore. A new era begins. Aaliyah stood behind the curtain, straightening Elijah's little collar. He hated ties. Ezra had already taken his off, and Aria, the youngest, sat on a velvet bench swinging her legs, holding a stuffed bear in one hand and a juice box in the other. "Mom," Elijah whispered, "what if they ask us something scary?" Aaliyah knelt down, her voice low and warm. "Then you tell them the truth. And if that's too hard, just smile like you're thinking about pizza." Ezra giggled. Arya blinked wide eyes up at her. "Will he be there?" Aaliyah paused. She didn't ask who he was. Her daughter had never met Marcus, but somehow she knew. "I don't know," Aaliyah said gently, "and it doesn't matter. You're not here for him. You're here for you, out front." Marcus stood behind the last row of reporters, arms crossed tight. He wasn't announced. He wasn't invited. But when the email blast about the new leadership team hit his inbox that morning, he couldn't stay away. The curtain pulled back. Aaliyah walked onto the stage in navy slacks, heels that didn't apologize, and confidence that made the entire room sit straighter. Behind her followed 3 children, 2 boys, 1 girl dressed simply but beautifully, standing like they'd practiced this in front of the mirror 100 times. Marcus froze. The youngest, the little girl, had his eyes. Aaliyah began. "Good morning. I'm Aaliyah Jackson, CEO of Phoenix Digital. This morning marks the beginning of a new chapter for Whitmore Enterprises. But for me, this moment began years ago on a very different kind of morning, one filled with fear and silence, one that changed my life forever." She looked at the room. 5 years ago, I was fired from this company while carrying my children. I walked out of this building not just unemployed, but unseen. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but she didn't flinch. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have a partner. I had 3 hearts inside of me and a world that expected me to disappear. She turned, lifted Arya into her arms. "These are my children, my reason, my anchor. The only team I had before Phoenix ever had investors." Cameras clicked wildly. Microphones inched forward, but she wasn't talking to them. She was talking to the woman she used to be, the one who stood in a raincoat outside Whitmore Tower, holding a sonogram and a pink slip. Marcus's throat tightened. He remembered that day, the way she had walked in with trembling hands, how she'd said, "Hey, I just thought you should know," and how he had said nothing that mattered. Now he watched the 3 children standing behind her, their backs straight, their chins high, and realized the cost of his silence. They weren't just her children, they were his, too, and they didn't know his name. After this speech, a journalist raised a hand. "Ms. Jackson, would you say this takeover was personal?" Aaliyah paused. The whole room leaned forward. She looked at the kids behind her, then straight into the camera. "No, this was never about revenge. This was about reclaiming space for every woman who's ever been erased." Another reporter asked, "Will the father of your children be involved in the company going forward?" Aaliyah's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's up to him." And then she walked off stage, head held high, children on either side, and the man who once had everything couldn't move. Backstage, Elijah tugged her sleeve. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. Is he sad?" Aaliyah glanced toward the door. Marcus was still standing in the back, frozen in place. She knelt down, kissed Elijah's forehead. "Maybe, but that's not our story to carry." She introduced her children not to claim a man, but to show the world that she didn't need one to rise. Chapter 7. The silence in his eyes. He didn't speak the entire ride home. The car crept through Chicago traffic, taillights glowing like bruises in the night. But Marcus didn't see any of it. His mind was stuck somewhere else, frozen backstage, long after Aaliyah and the children had gone. His children. He hadn't breathed right since Arya looked toward the crowd, then instinctively reached for Aaliyah's hand. Something in him had shattered quietly when he saw that. Not because he missed out on birthdays or report cards, but because it never occurred to her to reach for him. He hadn't earned that right. At home, the penthouse lights flicked on automatically. The space was immaculate, cold, the kind of luxury that echoed when you walked barefoot across the floor. He loosened his tie, took off his jacket, but the tension in his chest stayed. The framed photographs on the shelves showed deals signed, buildings opened, rooms full of applause, but not one photo of a family, not even a memory of one. He sat at the kitchen island with a glass of whiskey, and the echo of Aaliyah's voice replaying in his mind. I walked out of this building, not just unemployed, but unseen. Unseen. She had been in his office every day for 2 years, quiet, efficient, smart, in the kind of way that never made noise. He saw her take notes, run errands, stay late when no one asked her to. But did he ever really see her, or just what she gave him? A breeze whistled through a cracked window. Somewhere below, a siren wailed into the dark. Marcus leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, he remembered his mother, the way she used to whisper stories to him under a wool blanket, the way her perfume smelled like warmth and worn-out lavender, the way she left one morning and never came back. His father never said why, just that she wasn't built for this life. Marcus never asked again. He just learned how to close the door first, before anyone else could. Now, he thought of Aaliyah, walking out of his office, hand on her stomach, not a single tear falling, though she had every right to cry. She had given him the truth, and he had given her a form letter, the kind they used to dismiss people who stole office supplies. He reached for his phone, drafted a message, then deleted it, started again. Aaliyah, no, too stiff. I just wanted to say, delete. He set the phone down and buried his face in his hands. He didn't know how to apologize to someone who had already learned to live without him. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize the man looking back. He looked successful, but hollow somewhere. Aaliyah was probably making breakfast, packing school lunches, building tech dashboards while juggling 3 kids without a nanny, without a driver, without anyone to lean on. And he couldn't even find the courage to say he was sorry. Later that day, his assistant entered his office hesitantly. "There's a press request for comment," she said, holding a folder. "They're asking if you plan to co-lead with Miss Jackson, or if you're stepping down." He took the file, read it, then handed it back. "Tell them the truth," he said. The assistant blinked. "Which truth, sir?" Marcus looked out the window. The city blurred behind the glass. "The one where she no longer needs me." That night, he went online, watched an old keynote speech Aaliyah had given before the acquisition. Her voice was calm, clear. Leadership doesn't begin with power. It begins the moment someone says, "I believe in me," even when no one else does. He paused the video. The screen froze on her smile. He whispered into the empty room, "I wish I'd believed in you then." He had everything money could buy, but not the right to hear her children call him Dad. Chapter 8. Breaking the Promise. The sun had barely risen when Aaliyah stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a cereal bowl that didn't need more scrubbing. Her hands moved in circles, but her mind wasn't there. Ezra had started asking questions about the man in the back row, about why Elijah looked like him, about why Mommy's eyes got quiet when his name came up. She dried her hands, exhaled through her nose, and stared out at the parking lot. A cat darted between 2 trash cans. The wind carried the sound of a school bus brake sighing somewhere down the block. She hated this part, the part where survival turned into choice. Because the truth was, she didn't know if she wanted Marcus in their lives. And yet, some nights, when the world went still, she remembered the way he used to look at her before the silence set in, before fear disguised itself as professionalism, before her belly grew heavy with something he refused to acknowledge. But nostalgia, she'd learned, is not the same as healing. That afternoon, her phone buzzed, Marcus Whitmore. Again, this time a voice message. She didn't want to listen, but she did. Aaliyah, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I failed you. I failed them. But if you'll let me, I want to try. I want to know them. I want to start late, but honest. There was a pause. And if you can't let me in, I'll understand. I wanted you to hear my voice this time. She sat down on the edge of her bed. For a long time, she didn't move. That night, she met him, not in a boardroom, not under lights or cameras, but in the quiet corner of a downtown bookstore, the place she used to hide in on her lunch breaks. Back when she was just a secretary, he was already there when she arrived, sitting beside a window, a cup of black coffee, untouched on the table. When she walked in, he stood, not with confidence, with reverence. She nodded once, then sat down. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus broke the silence. You look strong. She tilted her head. I've had to be. He nodded, ashamed. I've watched every interview, every article. I've seen what you've built. And I've never admired anyone more. She looked at him. Then not the man from her past, but the one sitting in front of her now. And for the first time, he looked human. Why now? She asked softly. He didn't hesitate. Because I was a coward then. I didn't know how to be present, or honest, or brave. But watching them, his voice cracked. I want to be in their lives, not to fix what I broke, just to be there, if you'll let me. Aaliyah looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held 3 babies, coded through tears, built a company, refused to fall. She took a slow breath. I made them a promise, she whispered. Marcus leaned in. What kind of promise? That they would never feel the ache of being unwanted. Silence. He blinked, eyes glassy. Then maybe I don't deserve to be in their lives. Aaliyah nodded. Maybe you don't. She stood up slowly. But I didn't come here for a decision. I came here for closure. His voice dropped to a whisper. And is that what this is? She looked at him one last time. It's what I need. Because some stories don't end with reunions. Some end with release. She walked out without looking back. And this time, he didn't try to stop her. That night, Aaliyah sat beside Aria's bed, stroking her daughter's curls as she slept. Elijah and Ezra were curled up in their bunk beds, breathing soft and even. She whispered into the dark, I kept the promise. He was finally ready, but she was finally free. Chapter 9. The letter he never sent. It arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address, no seal, just her name written in a hand she hadn't seen in years. Aaliyah. She found it one morning in her mailbox, tucked between bills and coupons. She nearly tossed it aside, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the curve of the A, the hesitation before the H. Maybe it was the way her hands started trembling the moment she touched the paper. She didn't open it right away. She waited until the twins were at school, until Aria was down for her nap, until the house was quiet and the kettle had gone cold. Then, sitting at the kitchen table, the same one where she built Phoenix Digital, typed her first pitch deck, and cried after every early rejection she opened it. It wasn't long, but it hit like a confession whispered in the dark. Dear Aaliyah, I should have written this a long time ago, but I didn't have the courage then. I don't know if I have it now, either. I've watched you rise from the ashes of what I left you in, and I hate myself for being the fire instead of the shelter. The truth is, I was afraid, not of you, but of what you made me feel. You saw me, not the CEO, not the numbers, me, and that terrified me more than failure ever could. I told myself I was keeping things professional, that the clean cut would save us both. But what I did was cowardice. I walked away when you needed me most, and in doing so, I lost the only version of myself that ever felt like a man. I've watched our children in silence, from a distance that I don't deserve to close. I've replayed every moment, the way your hands shook, the way you looked at me like I'd shattered something sacred. I did. I shattered you, and still, you rebuilt. Stronger, brighter. You didn't need me. But God, Aaliyah, I wish I'd been worth needing. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted you to know you were never invisible. You were never disposable. You were everything I never had the courage to love out loud. Marcus. Aaliyah read it twice. The first time, she cried. The second time, she didn't. She folded the letter slowly, pressed it between the pages of her journal, and whispered, "It's too late, but thank you for finally seeing me." Later that evening, Elijah found her sitting on the back steps, staring at the sky. "Mom?" he asked, crawling into her lap like he used to. "Yeah, baby." He pointed at the clouds, turning amber and violet. "Do you think people can change?" She looked at him, at his wide eyes, his father's eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "but sometimes they change after the damage is already done." Elijah nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he should. Then he leaned his head on her shoulder and sighed. "I'm glad you didn't wait." She smiled into his hair. "Me too." That night, after the house fell asleep, she opened the journal again, and under Marcus's letter, wrote her own line, "You loved me too late. I loved myself just in time. Some apologies come wrapped in paper, but healing only begins when we stop waiting for them." Chapter 10. The Wedding in the Wind. It was supposed to rain that day. The clouds hovered, like they couldn't decide if they wanted to cry or just pass over in silence. Wind danced along the shoreline, tousling tablecloths and tugging at flower petals as if nature itself was trying to be part of something sacred. But Aaliyah didn't mind. She stood barefoot in the sand, her cream-colored dress rippling around her legs, the lake behind her reflecting a silver sky. Ezra chased seagulls in the distance. Arya sat cross-legged beside a flower arch, braiding daisies into her hair. Elijah adjusted his tiny bow tie with all the concentration of a grown man. There were only 20 people in attendance, friends, clients, neighbors who'd become family, and one man standing at the edge of the dunes, heart in his throat, ring in his pocket. It had been months since the letter. Marcus hadn't expected a reply. He hadn't even expected a second chance. But when Aaliyah invited him to Elijah's school presentation, and then to Arya's ballet recital, and finally to Ezra's science fair, something shifted. She didn't let him all the way in, but she stopped holding him all the way out. He began showing up, not with gifts or speeches, but with quiet consistency, picking up snacks after soccer practice, sitting in the back row during parent meetings, listening more than he spoke. He rebuilt trust with Legos and bedtime stories. And Aaliyah, she let herself see him again, not the man he had been, but the man who was trying. One night, while folding laundry on the couch, she looked at him and asked, "Why now?" He paused. "Because I finally understand the difference between possession and love, and I'd rather stand beside you as your equal than try to own you as your regret." She didn't answer, but she reached for his hand. Now, under an archway of wildflowers and wind, he stood across from her, a quiet question in his eyes. She took a breath, not because she was unsure, but because this moment was hers, not stolen, not salvaged, but chosen. The officiant's words blurred in the wind, but their meaning held. Love is not about perfection. It is about presence, about showing up again and again, even after the storms. Aaliyah looked at Marcus. "I don't need rescuing," she said gently. "I never did." His voice cracked. "I know. I just want to walk beside the woman who rescued herself." The children clapped before the vows even finished. Ezra yelled, "Just kiss her already." Everyone laughed, even Aaliyah. And when Marcus leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers, he whispered, "You were always more than just a secretary." She smiled, "And now I'm your wife." As they kissed soft and real and slow, the wind lifted a single strand of her hair into the air and carried it out over the lake. It didn't rain after all. That night, they danced barefoot under strings of light and stars that peeked out shyly from the clouds. Aaliyah's heels sat forgotten in the sand. Her children spun in circles, and Marcus stood at the edge of it all, watching her laugh like he never thought he'd hear again. He had lost her once, but somehow she let him find her anyway. She built a life alone. He learned to love without control. And when they finally met in the middle, it was not a rescue. It was a reunion. She was always more than just a secretary. Sometimes the people who break us don't come back to fix what they shattered. And sometimes they do. But we've already learned how to hold the pieces without them. Aaliyah Jackson never set out to become a tech CEO. She didn't dream of headlines or handshakes. She just wanted to be seen, wanted someone to look at her not through her, not past her, but at her, and say, "You matter, even now." But the world didn't offer that willingly, so she built it. One diaper change, one line of code, one whispered promise to 3 tiny souls who looked at her like she was already enough. And in the end, she didn't need a man to complete her. She needed to complete the sentence she once swallowed. "I am not small. I am not invisible. I am not done." As for Marcus, he learned what most powerful men never do. That love is not about control. It's not about fixing or owning. It's about staying. It's about being the quiet hands that catch someone when they no longer expect to fall. And when he stood at that altar, not as a CEO, but as a man who had finally learned how to show up. He didn't marry a secretary. He married the woman who saved herself and made space for him only when she had nothing left to prove. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel small, know this: you don't have to shout to be powerful. You don't have to be rescued to be whole. Sometimes the softest rise is the most unforgettable. If this story moved something in you, the next one goes even deeper. We're just getting started. Subscribe if you want to keep walking with women who refuse to break. Share if you believe quiet power deserves to be seen. And come back soon. There's always more love where this came from.